Hey Turtle Squad, welcome back to another Turtle Time. I'm your host, Kame the Turtle. I'm here with legendary author, Mattew Colvath, aka Darkflamewolf, for their third book in the Legend of Ayha series.
Hey everybody, it's good to be back again for another round.
First of all, congratulations on order. Not many people managed to publish one book, let alone three.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty surprised myself. Third book is well on its way to going out the door in 2023. I'm midway through writing book 4.
Unfortunately, we do not have a release date quite yet. Hey Turtle Squad, post-Kame here. When we were recording the video earlier, we did not have a solid date on when to expect the new book to release. But I have just gotten word that we are expecting it coming this summer. So, keep an eye out for the pre-release details, and make sure to pick up your copy of the book, Legend of Ayha, Figure of Prophecy, when available. Let me know what you think of it. Back to the video. As of recording this, we're waiting for a few more pieces of artwork for the book.
Yes, this is correct. Some of the interior maps, which I know a lot of the fans really love and adore. They like looking at the world and all the world building those maps provide, and so I really want to make sure that's available to you for book 3 as well, because we go into a brand new location that we haven't really touched upon in the previous 2 books.
That leads me into a first question. Who does the artwork for the exterior and interior of the book?
Well, I have 3 artists that I am working with, and they are all great friends and fantastic people, and I am blessed to have them on this journey with me through all 6 books. For the cover artist, my dear friend Rulina. She and I have known each other since 2017, right around the time Taylor herself was technically born, if you will, and she has always wanted to do book covers, so she is loving the fact that she is finally able to see her dream come true. As for the interior illustrations, which honestly continue to get better and better with every book, book 3 is phenomenal. With the interior illustrations, it is Kame1. That is K-A-M-1. He is an up-and-coming artist that I found also back in 2019, and I loved his very unique, dark, gritty style that almost reminded me of similar styles such as Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, if anybody knows that series. I'm just like, this is the type of mood I want for my books. So I hired him on right away, and he is very eager to do more and more dark and gritty images. He's all for it. And then finally, my third artist is, let's just put him as Julius. He's actually the newest one to the whole group, the whole gang here, and he actually hails from the Zootopia fandom, and he is trying to make a little extra money on the side, and he offered his services saying, hey, I can actually do some maps. I have a program that can create some interesting looking old time maps, and I took a look at his stuff, and I was like, you know what, you're hired, prices are good, and there you have it. That was my team starting from book 1 all the way up till now.
Excellent. Links for each of those artists will be found in the description below. Make sure to check them out later. The next question I would have for you, and this might be touching upon our first interview, linked in the cards above and description below, check it out later. Why did you settle on the idea of tail moths being such an integral part of the story?
That is an excellent and great question. I think I touched upon it briefly in the author notes of book 1, but I came across tail moths during my first year or so, being inducted into the furry fandom from a bunch of my friends and everything, and there was one person in particular, I think Desoto Jellywolf, who became good friends with me at the time, and he had a tail moth, and I was just like very fascinated and everything. Like, I'm not into the whole sub-genre that those tail moths usually reside in, but I thought that was such a neat looking visual, almost like a gimmick to your character, and I didn't really have an idea. Like, at the time I was writing Zootopia fanfic, but I was getting more and more entranced with this sort of idea, like what would happen if someone was born with this sort of appendage to their tail, and how would it affect their life? And the more I thought about it, the more the idea expanded to where it's just like, I can actually make something out of this. I can make a real story based on this. At the time, it wasn't as grand or, epic as it has turned out to be, but at the time I knew there was at least a small personal story, at least at the core of Taylor, and I wanted to explore that.
Fascinating. So I know that you're going to be introducing a brand new area of the world to the readers. Was it based on any real country or region?
It's actually on a mixture of countries and or regions. Like, for example, Navarnu, the country that's off to the west-northwest of Balkar and stuff like that, where we've only heard mention, Natalia's homeland. That's sort of a mixture of, like, say, Russia, China, Mongolia, Japan, like that whole area. It's just a mix of those types of cult and things like that. So taking that concept and applying it to a brand new country, this one is more, I guess, fictional, you could say, in nature, but it also falls in line with sort of like a caste system, things that you would find in India and stuff like that, or possibly cultures in Africa with where they have more of a king or some sort of emperor that they do, like, that governs the nearby tribes and stuff like that. So I've tried to incorporate various aspects of multiple countries in that in those regions and make it a single culture, a single country that we're going to be visiting, in which case for book 3 it would be Taukar, which we've only heard mentioned only a couple times in book 2.
Ah yes, Taukar. It's the country of the reptile.
In the vast southern continent of jungle and open grasslands. So yeah, basically kind of like in the Africa sort of section of the world, if you will.
Africa, South America, where have you.
Yeah, in those regions.
This is where there's a lot of reptiles, specifically very poisonous reptiles.
Yes, there are some very poisonous reptiles. There are none that factor into book 3 specifically, just because it never came up that they would need to use that sort of ability or inherent poison that they have on their skin or whatnot. But yeah, it will come into play later on as we go engage in more hostilities with these reptiles. But for the moment, that just never came up. You saw a little bit of that in book 1 towards the end, for those who've read it, where there were some reptiles that had some sort of acid spit. So we'll be seeing some more of that later down the line.
We're introduced to a brand new character in book 2 in the form of Rakis, who also has a tail maw. Where did his inspiration come from?
Well, his inspiration, I knew from the very beginning I wanted a dual character, like kind of to be opposite Taylor. Now granted, he has not been a big player so far in the series, but he will grow into that role. But I wanted something vastly different to what Taylor was. So the first thing was, of course, to change his species. So he is a chameleon, something I don't actually really use much in the story, to include my current book 3, where we deal with a lot of reptiles. He's the only one that stands out among the bunch. So I kind of came up with the idea, like, what would happen if Taylor's like the good side of having a tail maw? What would be the bad side of having a tail maw? Someone who uses it for more nefarious ends or deeds, and how would they go about living their life? And I kind of started from there, and then worked through more details throughout books 2 and 3, and I think we've created something very unique and interesting that by the time book 6 rolls around, he's going to be a very memorable character.
Other than just the complete psycho we know him as right now.
Oh no, he's still psycho. He's still very much psycho. But by the time books 4 and 5 roll around, you'll understand why he is the way he is. Doesn't necessarily excuse him, but it gives him a lot more depth. But right now, it's not his turn to shine. There's other bigger plots right now at play, but his time will come to shine, and more will be illuminated on who he is as a person.
Right now you need to be careful with how you work with him and other newer characters, because you're still fleshing out the old characters from book 1.
This is correct, and you actually brought up a great point. I introduced Rakis early so that he's there in the back of your mind, even though he's not too big of a player in books 2 and 3 and a little bit of book 4, the fact that he's kind of there as an undercurrent of influence here and there makes sure that he stays relevant for when he actually does become important. So that gives me more time in books 2, 3, and 4 to actually focus on other characters, other protagonists, other side characters that people are more currently interested in. And once we flesh those out and we've completed their character arcs, then we can come back to Rakis later in the series and then push him to the front.
Absolutely fascinating. Any characters you're looking forward to introducing in book 3?
There are a few characters. The biggest one of which is Marley Tulbinder. We will be introduced to her character. Probably if those who have followed my galleries and stuff, you will see a lot of pictures of Marley and get to hear or read a lot of her backstory, but you don't really get the full picture of who she is until you read the book. And in fact, there was a lot of beta readers who read the book, and they didn't quite click with them, her character, until towards the end when they finally understood what she was all about. You know, what her past was, who had shaped her, and once they got that, they got the character, and they absolutely fell in love with her. And so I hope that's the same deal with everybody else. And then we also had a lot of birds in this particular book. I know we had a couple in book 2 with Nina and, you know, her parents and stuff like that, but this time we have a whole culture of birds, and we're meeting people like Cassius, Callium, you know, Theridus, Hinfis, you know, all these characters. You have no idea what these names are, but these are all characters that you will be introduced to and learning about them throughout book 3. And then, of course, finally, we actually have a small little brief cameo of Kanya, the Draconid. She's kind of the missing link, in my opinion, to connecting the current everyday struggles and aspects, the normal aspects of this world, to the more fantastical, like magic, dragons, and things like that. She's kind of the connecting tissue, so I figured kind of drop her in this book briefly and then flesh her out more in book 4. So she's another fun one I am eager for you all to meet.
Speaking of dragon, you gave us a brief introduction to a specific dragon. I believe their name is Lydia in book 1, but it was only a flyby mention. What can you tell us more about the dragon of your world?
Well, books 1 and 2, Lydia is actually mentioned several times, either by name specifically or by reference to her as a character in these children's books that Taylor has realized that her mother read to her when she was a young cub, and then is now finding more instances of this dragon that from her childhood. In book 3, we will find out that more people have read these children's books, and not just in the northern countries either. So it seems like this knowledge of these dragons are throughout the current world right now, and we get to learn more about them, or at least their potential impact on world history and how they shaped the cultures based on their influence. But we still don't get a full picture in book 3 about the dragon, and I can't really say more about them until book 4. Book 4 is where I drop a lot of the lore regarding them, but right now we gotta focus on other parts of the plot, other parts of the narrative.
In book 1, we were given a general gloss over of the bunny issue in this world, and in book 2, we get a more in-depth look on it. What can you tell us about it?
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but bunnies are not very treated exceptionally well in this world. They are born into, I wouldn't say exactly servitude, but just about. They are free to live their own lives. They are free to do any job they choose to go after, although there are some class ceilings, which are pretty apparent as you read through book 2. And they end up in service to other mammals. They are considered a servant class type of mammal, of which there are very, very few, and they seem to be almost the sole ones. But I worked with this idea with Lucario 389. He is the original creator of Jake Thumpings, who was also introduced in book 2. We worked on this rabbit issue, this rabbit idea and concept for this world, as a means to provide a background and potential reason why Taylor and Jake would ever meet up, like, at all. Like, beginning, there were no reasons for these two characters to even come together in terms of just meeting, striking up a friendship, or anything like that. So this world-building plot point is used as a way to bring characters together and to provide further context for what's to come later in, books 4, 5, and 6.
I'm kind of curious, what other animals would be considered servant class?
Well, then we need to start getting into other animals that I've already touched upon in book 3, which is something that hasn't been released yet, but let's say, for example, the birds. Sometimes sparrow class, or even I almost want to say the falcon class actually could be a servant class. They're only regulated to be knights or soldiers for their colonies. They don't get to choose whatever they want to do, and they're usually considered underneath most other types or species of birds. So that's a little preview into what's coming up next. So a very rigid class-based structure system for their culture. And then as for, for mammals, probably some smaller servant-type mammals, like maybe mice or something like that. I haven't really fleshed the smaller mammals out really in the world yet, but I could do that later on. Yeah, so there are a multitude of possibilities that I could explore in the series.
Right now, the smallest one I'm aware of in the books revealed so far are rabbits. We haven't seen anyone rabbit size or smaller play an active role in the story. We might see them in the background, but by and large, they're not there. Now I know you mentioned how there's mammals, birds, and reptiles like me in this world. Are there any bug or fish people in your world?
Not yet. I have not referred to them. I have not referenced them. I have not give credence to their existence. But that's not to say they don't exist. It's just that in terms of the context of the story of who we're following, they just don't come up.
Now that brings me to an interesting point. What about sea mammals like whales and dolphins? Are they considered mammals or are they considered fish?
They are considered mammals, as they are here in our world. However, they just don't play a factor currently in the books right now. They might in a later book when it comes time for a couple characters to go to sea, but we will see when we get to that point.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Now I know in book 1 and 2, we see some futuristic tech in the form of hover beam. What other tech can we see in book 3?
Well, the reptiles also have hover vehicles too, but they are powered in a different way. They also have certain other types of methods of air transportation, like zeppelins and things like that. They also have sort of like a more steampunk-ish type of technology, and in fact, for those who have finished book 2, spoilers, the behemoths are also their invention as well. So they have technology to basically make walking weapons of mass destruction, and we will get to learn a lot more about these behemoths and how they function, and also how they work and what powers and fuels them. And so you get to get a lot of questions answered about them in book 3. So look forward to that. But yeah, all this is sort of like steampunk / dieselpunk nature in technology, but with a little extra added futurism thrown into the mix with those types of style.
Fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading more about this, as I found the steampunk culture idea very interesting. If you had any advice to offer to anyone who wants to write a similar book to yours, or any books in general, what advice would that be?
Write it how you want. There are tons of tips, tricks, advice, best practices out there for how to write a book, how to write characters, how to write dialogue, how to write description, how to write lore, how to show, not tell. All that out there is great and valuable information, but at the end of the day, in the words of the famous Captain Barbossa, they're more like guidelines than actual rules. You have to first understand why they exist and understand why they work, but you are more than welcome to, once you've had that established understanding, to break those rules and write your book however you want. And the corollary to this is write what interests you. Because if you write a book that you enjoy, and you write a book that you have fun, plotting out and seeing it develop as you write, then there's going to be an audience for it. People will read just about anything, and don't be afraid. If you write it, they will come, and that's my advice.
Excellent. How do you decide upon the names of your chapters? Do you build the chapter around the title, or do you pick the title after the chapter is written?
It is the latter. I pick the chapter title after it is written. However, there have been a few rare cases where the chapter title comes before the writing of it. And one of those cases, for example, is the chapter title of Jake in book 2. I knew exactly what I was going to do for that chapter, and I was like, there's no other way to name this other than the name of Jake. And then other times, for example, in book 3, chapter 1 is named Change. But that came about as I was reading through the chapter after I had finished writing it, and I was like, okay, what is the big takeaway concept from this particular chapter? And it is change. How much has changed since the events of book 2? We are about a year later in time from the end of the events of book 2. What is the world like? What is Taylor like? What's her world look like? Let's see the changes. And that's what prompted the name for the chapter. So it could go either way.
If you go to read book 2 and then book 3 right after, you'll be a time traveler.
Yes, that's correct.
Or go from book 3 back to book 1.
Yes, you will. And there'll be even more of a time travel as we go through the series. There'll be another time skip somewhere in there. I won't say where.
Now, book 3 is titled Figure of Prophecy. How did you come up with the title for the book?
Well, it all pretty much stems from the focal point of it, which is Taylor, and introducing a brand new concept to the world, which has always been there. It's been there in books 1 and 2, you just have not had a word put to it yet, and that is prophecy. All the inconsistencies in script and in the world-building lore of how this magic works, that can be assigned to prophecy, and you're going to get a lot of explanation about how that works and how it is in direct opposition to script. And so you got these two magic constructs, and Taylor is, of course, able to influence both. And so the title came from that. She is a figure of prophecy.
Absolutely fascinating. I'm looking forward to exploring this concept more as I dive through the book. That next question is that I had, and many others who read the first book on, how to mammals and birds with feathers and hooves instead of normal paw pads grab anything.
This actually gets touched upon in book 3 with a new character who's a giraffe called Marley Tallbender. She has hooves, and just like every other character in books 1 and 2 who have hooves, you can kind of retcon this back to books 1 and 2 and be like, this is how their hands are. So they have 5-digit fingers for their hands. However, front third of each finger is encased in almost like the hoof-like material, the keratin or whatever. That, of course, they can't grip really well, but they can grip better than if it was just a singular hoof. They have 5 fingers, but most of it is hoof keratin. Now, their hind feet, their hind hooves, those are what you would expect, actual hooves, and they can walk on those bipedally. It's just the front hands are more akin to what you think like humans, just slightly different.
Fascinating. All you My Little Pony fan writers out there, take note. Final question before we get to the final word. I know in book 2, it is revealed that Ahya can communicate with Taylor, but their personalities are fairly different. Why is that?
Extremely different, yes. Well, for one, they are their own 2 individual people. They are not the same person, and if you read book 2, you'll understand why that is. So, I wanted Ahya's personality to mimic someone who had no real social etiquette and who had grown up with nothing but feeling and taste as the 2 senses that they could see the world and experience the world. So all the finer points of social interaction she does not have, or she has limited understanding, because she just doesn't understand the importance of being proper or being, not as blunt, being subtle. She's not very subtle as a character. And for those who have beta read my book 3, they absolutely love that aspect about Ahya. She is a blast of humor into almost any situation you put her in, and she's almost like a side commentator on what's happening in every scene that she's a part of, and most of the times that commentary tends to more or less match what the reader's feeling about these scenes. So when Ahya does become serious and she does get more, I guess you could say, less humorous, then something is really wrong and it's time to sit up and pay attention. Something bad is going down.
By and large, she's the wild child of the group.
That she is.
And she kind of reminded me of that one case study, I forget their name, but there was this little blind and deaf girl.
Helen Keller?
Yes, Helen Keller.
In fact, one of my beta readers likened her to Helen Keller, actually.
How do you feel that comparison stacks up?
Well, they're pretty similar in terms of what they had to deal with, in terms of being able to not see the world like everybody else. I think Ahya has a little bit of an advantage because she does understand speech and she does understand spatial awareness, but it isn't because of hearing. It's because of the sound vibrations in the air. She has a highly tuned sense of touch. And like bats, it's almost like echolocation for Ahya, so she can see where she is kind of in space as long as there's sound going on. And in terms of language, she has learned to interpret that as well through growing up alongside Taylor. So she does have a little bit more of an advantage in this respect.
So if there were 2 bats near Ahya talking in supersonic mode, aka echolocation, would she be able to understand them?
You mean bats?
Yeah.
No, she wouldn't understand them. She doesn't know their language. She's only knows the language that she grew up with alongside Taylor and what Taylor speaks.
Alright, fair enough. But if she did know the language, would she understand what they're talking about if they're talking in echolocation.
Absolutely. If she grew up and took the time to learn that language of the bats, then yes, she would probably understand.
Question is, would Taylor actually understand, and if Ahya never bothered to teach her?
Taylor, absolutely not. She would not understand. And it's debatable if Ahya would translate for her or not. It just depends on her mood.
Do you have any final words you would like to convey to the audience?
Well, I am trying something new with this book. We are now moving away from the familiar. We're moving away from the cyberpunk, modern-esque nature of the culture, the society, the buildings, the locations, stuff that is more akin to what we're used to in our own world. Cell phones, trains, cars, those sorts of things. Now we're going to move to a different continent, a different world, a different culture, and a different people altogether. Like, we're now dealing with reptiles, we're now dealing with birds, and I'm now dealing with multiple storylines running concurrently. It is an experiment, and one that I am in a lot of pain and agony trying to wrap up in book 4, but I think it's going to pay off. So just know that I'm trying to take the series into new directions, and I'm trying to slowly but surely add more and more fantastical elements into the books. Because so far, they've been kind of, minimal, but now it's time to start breaking open the floodgates, and book 3 is just the first step to that.
Alright people, we need to help make sure that Darkflamewolf here is paying, if not for nothing. So go grab the book when it's available. I'll put a link in the description below where you can get it. Once again, thank you to Mattew Colvath for joining me for this interview.
Thank you for having me back once again.
And let us hope that next interview will be as good or better as this, because book 4 is coming right around the corner. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. And check out the video on screen right now for another video you might like to watch. I'll see you next time. Johnny.